Ever had one of those management moments
Yeah.
where you're like, ugh, should have said something? Like you just
No.
knew in your gut feedback was needed, but you hesitated, held back.
Hmm.
Yeah, this deep dive is for all of us who've been there. We're really going to crack open this book, Radical Candor by Kim Scott, and see why sometimes those tough conversations done right are really the kindest thing we can do for our teams.
And what's so interesting is how Scott uses her own experiences, right? From places like Apple and Google to really bring these principles to life. And she doesn't shy away from her own, let's just say, learning moments when it comes to management.
Oh, absolutely. Like she jumps right in, starts the book with this story about an employee, Bob, who ultimately had to be let go. And she owns it, admits that she wasn't giving him the feedback he needed, didn't create the environment for honesty to thrive. But here's the part that really hit me. She talks about Bob's regret. He actually said, "Why didn't anyone tell me?" It makes you think, right?
It does. It's a powerful reminder that staying silent, while maybe more comfortable in the moment, can really do more harm than good in the long run.
Okay, so silence not the answer. But what is, how do we actually do radical candor? What's the secret sauce?
So it's all about finding this balance, this sweet spot between, and she nails it with these phrases, caring deeply and challenging directly. Think of it visually, like a two-dimensional axis. You've got care personally on one side. And just to clarify, this isn't about being everyone's best friend.
Right, not about being work besties or anything.
Exactly. It's more about a genuine approach. Seeing your team as people, with lives, quirks, ambitions, all that stuff that exists beyond the office walls.
Ditching that whole superior mindset that I'm the boss, you're the worker vibe.
Exactly. No one thrives in that environment. So that's one side. And then on the other side of the axis, you have challenge directly. This is where you're giving constructive criticism, but in a way that shows you're invested in their growth. You're not just there to tear them down.
And she tells this great story, right, about correcting a stranger's grammar. Now, I don't know about you, but I would never, ever have the guts to do that. But the stranger's reaction, it's surprising.
It really is. The stranger says, it's not mean, it's clear. Like, wow. Sometimes that directness, when it comes from a good place, can be way more respectful than tiptoeing around the issue.
It's true. Now, I love how she contrasts radical candor with other management styles, the ones we've probably all experienced at some point in our careers. She calls them out. Obnoxious aggression, ruinous empathy, and manipulative insincerity. Let's unpack those a bit, because I think we can all relate to at least one of these.
Oh, absolutely. So let's start with obnoxious aggression. That's your classic in-your-face criticism. Zero empathy. We've all had that boss, right? Makes you want to disappear during team meetings.
Hide under the table.
Exactly. And while, sure, at least it's direct, it's definitely not creating a thriving team environment.
Then there's ruinous empathy, which almost sounds counterintuitive. Too much empathy. How's that even possible, let alone a bad thing?
Well, picture this. You've got a manager who's so worried about hurting feelings that they avoid giving any tough feedback at all. Their intentions are good, their heart's in the right place, but the team ends up in the dark, unsure of how they're actually doing, how to improve.
Which leads us to, and this one can be sneaky, manipulative insincerity.
Oh yeah, this is where things get messy. Think backhanded compliments, fake praise, saying one thing to someone's face and then something completely different behind their back.
Ugh, the worst.
The worst. And it creates this culture of distrust. No one wants to work in that kind of environment.
Absolutely not. And what I appreciate is that Skit doesn't just tell us what not to do. She digs into the nuances of what actually motivates people, which, let's be real, that's key for any manager who wants to be effective.
100%. And this is where her idea of growth trajectory comes in, right? It challenges this assumption that everyone's climbing the same corporate ladder at the same pace, or that they even want to climb it at all.
Because some people are perfectly content right where they are, and that's okay.
Exactly. You've got your rock stars who consistently deliver, but they might not need the limelight. And keeping those team members engaged, that's gold.
It's about recognizing that we're all wired differently. Not everyone fits that stereotypical superstar mold of constantly chasing promotions.
And that's okay. She actually shares this story, it's kind of wild, about an employee who ends up leaving to start a spirulina farm. It highlights that sometimes those personal passions, they trump the corporate ladder, and a good manager, they get that. They support those individual aspirations, even if it means someone eventually moves on.
So we've established that understanding individual motivations is key. But how do we actually put radical candor into practice? How do we master the art of giving and receiving guidance effectively?
Well, it's not just about what you say, it's how you say it. Scott really dives into the nitty-gritty, emphasizing humility, especially when delivering criticism. No one wants to feel like they're being talked down to, right?
Totally. It's like that saying, feedback is a gift, but it's got to be given with care, not thrown like a brick through a window.
Exactly. And timing matters. The longer you wait, the more awkward and less impactful it becomes. Instead of letting things fester, Scott advocates for those quick, informal conversations.
Like ripping off a Band-Aid, right? Address it quickly and move on.
Precisely. Now, for criticism, she suggests a really practical framework, the situation behavior impact model. Instead of saying your presentation was confusing, try, during the financial slide situation, the rapid switching between charts, behavior, made it hard for the team to follow impact.
It's about being specific and focusing on the actionable part, not just making a general statement.
Exactly. And on the flip side, when giving praise, be specific and genuine. Good job just doesn't cut it. Explain what they did well and why it matters.
I love this part. She stresses that even praise should be tailored to the individual. Some people crave public recognition, while others might cringe at the thought.
It all comes back to knowing your team, right? Understanding what makes them tick, what motivates them, what makes them feel valued. Now, receiving criticism, that can be a whole other challenge, especially when you're the boss.
Oh, absolutely. People are naturally hesitant to criticize those in positions of authority. We've all been there trying to sugarcoat things or avoid giving the boss bad news altogether.
So Scott offers some techniques for encouraging your team to be more candid with you. She even suggests embracing public criticism, making it clear that you're open to feedback and willing to learn from it.
It's about creating that culture of feedback where everyone feels safe to speak up, both to praise and to criticize. And she's got some really creative ideas for how to do that.
Right, like the Whoops the Monkey and Killer Whale Awards. These inject a little humor and playfulness into what can be, let's face it, a sometimes uncomfortable process.
I love those. So tell us more about how those work.
Well, the Whoops the Monkey Award is a fun way to encourage people to own up to their mistakes. It's about creating a culture where it's okay to make mistakes as long as we learn from them. And the Killer Whale Award is a way to recognize those who give really great, impactful feedback, even when it's tough to hear.
I love how those tie back to that idea of caring personally while challenging directly.
Exactly. It's about finding creative ways to reinforce those values and make them part of the team's DNA. And then there are skip-level meetings. Have you ever used those?
I've heard of them, but I'll admit I'm a little unclear on the specifics.
So skip-level meetings are when you, as a manager, meet with people who don't report directly to you. It gives you a broader perspective on how your team is functioning and allows you to gather feedback from different levels.
That's a great way to get a pulse on things, especially in larger teams.
Exactly. But Scott cautions that these meetings need to be handled carefully. The goal isn't to undermine direct managers or create a culture of backstabbing.
Right. It's about gaining additional insights, not creating division.
Exactly. She suggests having these meetings with everyone who has direct reports, so it feels like a regular process, not a punishment. And confidentiality is key. You can share the feedback with the manager, but not who said it.
That makes a lot of sense. So you've got this culture of feedback humming along. What's next on the radical candor journey?
Well, Scott then dives into techniques for managing teams effectively. And it all starts with crystal clear roles and responsibilities. Avoid that everyone does everything chaos.
You're speaking my language. Nothing drains productivity faster than a team with unclear roles.
Right. And then comes the power of no surprises.
Mm.
When it comes to performance reviews, they should be a culmination of all that ongoing feedback, not a time to drop bombshells or blindside someone with criticism.
So true. Nothing good comes from surprising people during performance reviews. It should be a conversation, not an ambush.
Exactly. And Scott has some great tips for making those performance reviews more productive. For example, she suggests soliciting feedback on your own management first. It sets the tone and shows you're open to hearing it from both sides.
I love that. Leading by example, showing that you're also striving for continuous improvement.
Exactly. She also emphasizes the importance of writing things down beforehand to ensure clarity and focusing on constructive criticism that helps the person grow. It's not about dwelling on the negative, it's about identifying areas for development.
It's amazing, though, right, how just having those notes prepped can really shift the whole dynamic as a conversation.
Totally.
And what I found really interesting is how Scott also talks about this idea of walking around staying connected with the broader organization, not just your immediate team,
Right.
because it's so easy to get like siloed as a manager, hyper focused on your own little world.
It's true, and she makes such a good point that those informal interactions, those are where you get the gold. Like
Yeah.
she tells this story about Dick Costolo, Twitter's former CEO. He was known for literally just wandering the office,
Yes.
chatting with people from different departments, getting a real feel for what was happening on the ground.
Wow.
When it wasn't about micromanaging or anything,
Right.
it was about staying connected,
Yeah.
feeling the pulse of the organization.
I bet he picked up on stuff that would never have made it into like a formal report.
Exactly. And, it really underscores that whole idea that leadership isn't about sitting in an ivory tower.
Yeah.
Even those small, everyday actions, they make a difference. They have a ripple effect on company culture. And this one story she tells, it stuck with me, about moving a misplaced couch at Google.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What's the deal with the couch?
So there was this couch, and it was in a weird spot, like blocking a walkway. And Scott and her team, they just decided to move it,
Okay.
even though technically it wasn't their job.
Right. Right.
And it ended up becoming like this symbol, this symbol of taking initiative,
Yeah.
of not being afraid to just fix things, even if it was something small.
I love that.
And the coolest part is the impact of that, like that little act, it lasted even after she left Google.
It's true. It's like sometimes those small things speak volumes, like that saying, no task is below you.
Right, exactly.
Hmm.
And on a more, I guess, individual level, Scott's a big advocate for carving out think time in your schedule.
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking about actually blocking it off on your calendar,
Yes.
like you would a meeting,
Yes.
and treating it as sacred.
This think time thing is huge. I used to think, like, oh, I'm way too busy to just sit and think. But honestly, some of my best ideas, they come from those sessions.
It's about creating space for those breakthroughs, right?
Yeah.
For processing all the feedback you're getting and, just stepping back from the daily grind to actually think strategically.
Absolutely.
Now, before we wrap up, I did want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, this idea of leading by example.
Yes.
Because Scott makes this really compelling point that as a manager, you're always setting the tone, whether you realize it or not.
It's like actions speak louder than words, right?
Exactly.
Or, oh, what's that other saying? Something like, people may not remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
Yeah, that's a good one. And she uses this analogy of a rock tumbler, which I thought was pretty powerful.
Okay.
All that constant friction and debate that happens within a team, when it's done with respect, with candor, it can actually polish, both the ideas and the people involved.
Oh, I like that.
It's not about avoiding conflict. It's about creating a space where it can actually be a good thing,
Right.
where people feel safe challenging each other, knowing that ultimately it's all in service of the best possible outcome.
It's like we're all works in progress, constantly being like shaped and refined by those around us.
That's a great way to put it. So, just imagine if every manager embraced these principles, the caring personally,
Yeah.
the challenging directly, the think time, the walking around.
Right.
Imagine how much more engaging, how much more innovative our workplaces could be.
It's a powerful vision, isn't it? A world where like honesty and empathy, they're not at odds with each other. They're actually the cornerstones of what makes a workplace thrive.
A workplace where everyone feels valued, supported, and empowered to really do their best work.
Absolutely. And on that inspiring note, we're going to wrap up our deep dive into radical candor. Hopefully you found this conversation as insightful as I did. And maybe, just maybe, it sparks some ideas for your own management journey. Remember, it's about finding that sweet spot, caring deeply while challenging directly.
Because at the end of the day, that's how we help our teams reach their full potential and create workplaces where everyone can thrive.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for diving in with us today.